Welcome to Orthodox Christian Television. This is Chios, the Island of Saints, Part 2. The Island of Saints, Part 2, we're talking about the history of Chios with Dr. Miljan Peter Illich. Dr. Illich, thank you for coming back again.
Thank you.
We left off with the Battle of Lade, I believe. The Battle of Lade, please set it up for us. Who was fighting who? What was about to happen?
The Battle of Lade took place in 494 BC. Lade is a small island of Asia Minor. And the battle involved an attempt by the Ionian Greeks, who had been taken over by the Persian, by the expanding Persian Empire, which was a dictatorial empire, Persia, which aimed at conquering the whole world if it could get away with it. And the Ionian Greeks were trying to win their freedom back from the Persians.
Now, the Ionian Greeks were the Greeks who basically began what we know today as classical Greek culture and civilization.
Essentially.
This is before the Athenians.
Before the Athenians, essentially, Greek civilization as we know it started among the Ionian Greeks, and this involves everything from philosophy to science to art, anything and everything that is today defined as Greek civilization started in Ionia, and then it moved westward to the other Greeks in the mainland of Greece.
Now the Achaeans, the people of the island of Chios, were a part of this Ionian League, this allied force that was going to meet the Persians.
The Chians were actually the main force of the Ionian League. There were 353 Ionian ships which were facing 600 Persian ships. And the Persians were actually very afraid of the Ionian ships, even though they outnumbered them. So they...
Why did they fear such a...
Because the Ionians had a reputation for being fierce fighters. Not only were they excelling in culture, but they were also fierce fighters and great sailors. And they were famous all over the world of that time as sailors and navigators. And the Persians managed before the battle to send secret agents to wean away part of the Ionian force. And mainly, Achaean force had 100 ships. One of the largest other contingents was the force from the island of Samos, which had 60 ships. The Persians persuaded almost the entire Samian navy to desert on the eve of the battle, and they were followed by the ships of Lesbos, who also deserted. So what we had were basically, for the most part, just the navy of Chios.
So how many
remained.
ships?
Altogether, there were 100 ships from Chios and maybe approximately 60 or 70 from other Ionian city-states.
So the Samians from Samos and the people of the fleet of Lesbos left the Allied force.
Before the battle, they deserted.
Did they join the Persian? Did they join the Persian fleet, or did they just went home?
They just went home for the meantime. They just left. They didn't join the Persian fleet. They left, and they left the navy of Chios practically alone to fight the overwhelming Persian navy.
Now, this battle, was it a rebellion of the Ionian Greeks, or was it an attempt to stem, to hold back an invasion?
No, actually it was a rebellion. They had been conquered by the founder of the Persian Empire, Cyrus, and they had remained under Persia for about 50 years until they rebelled. Among the leading rebels were the people of Chios, who at that time had developed among the citizens of Chios, had developed democratic institutions and were more and more restive under the increasingly dictatorial Persian rule by the successors of Cyrus.
They developed a democracy?
They developed an extremely democratic system for that time. One paradoxical aspect is that in Chios was one of the largest slave-owning and trading city-states among the Greeks. But for the citizens of Chios, which we have a record for the 5th century from Diodorus, that Chios had approximately 30,000 free citizens at that time. And the citizens actually had an amazingly democratic system, which we know We know quite a bit about it, among other things, because in 1907, in a small village in southern Chios, a stone tablet was found, which is actually the earliest known written constitution in the whole world.
In other words, what you're saying is that democracy, well, let me ask you a question. If we can say that democracy was developed and invented in Greece, and the Chian constitution and democracy is the oldest Greek democracy or constitution, then can't we, isn't it safe to say, that the Chians developed and invented democracy?
Technically, it is possible that the
As far as we know. I mean,
as far as we know, according to our present information, it is possible to say that the Chians invented democracy as we know it, because this particular constitution, which is in stone, actually describes a system which is very much like the American system. There are two houses, there are two legislatures. There's one elected by the citizens, in which each of the tribes of Chios has 50 representatives who are chosen by the tribe to represent its interest. And at this particular time, Chios had at least 3 and possibly 6 tribes, so there might have been as many as 300 members, which is not too different from the House of Representatives. There was also an aristocratic body chosen by the elite.
It sounds like the House of Lords, rather
or even the United States Senate, because the United States Senate originally was not chosen by the people; it was chosen by state legislatures. It was meant to represent an elite interest in the country and not the popular interest. This has since been changed. Now there was also a head of state who was chosen by the assemblies, and there was an independent judiciary as well.
Wait, before we get to the judiciary, what was the head of state called?
Well, the Basileus was the name that they have in the Constitution for the head of state. The head, interestingly enough...
Basileus means king.
King, but he wasn't really a king. It was meant more in the sense of like a leading magistrate rather than a king. He was not a king. He was the leading magistrate who was picked by...
He was not an autocrat.
At this particular time, he was not. In fact, there were even, in the Constitution, there are even provisions for something like impeachment if the main officials of the state are found taking bribes or committing crimes. They can be fined and they can be judged by the aristocratic body. They could be an appeal to the body of the citizens as well.
What about Nixon have escaped impeachment in Chios?
Well, I think this is some new morality which at this particular time was not in existence.
Well, as far as we know.
As far as we know. But it is known that the Athenians actually often referred to the Chian constitution, and there are a number of scholars who believe that Solon, who is credited with giving law to Athens, was actually influenced highly by the Chian constitution.
Solon, the great lawgiver.
That's right.
Was from Athens and may have gotten and been influenced by his ideas by the Chian constitution and democracy.
That's right.
What about our own founding fathers here in America?
Well, it is also known that they referred in their plans for the American Constitution, they had also studied the Athenian Constitution. Now, they could not have studied this particular stone because it was only found in 1907, and it is now only to be studied in the Archaeological Museum in Istanbul or Constantinople. But the Athenians gave a lot of credit to the Chian people for many things, and including as far as Chian influence on Athenian laws and institutions.
So it was known to the founding fathers of this country that Chios had democracy before the Athenians had it.
Well, that should have been pretty well known by that time. And in fact, by the way, the credit given to Chios by the Athenians is reflected in Aristophanes' played the birds. And the birds, it indicates that the Athenian priests would invoke the blessings of the gods, health and salvation for the people of Athens and for the Chians together.
Why for the Chians? Because
for 2 reasons. One, they respected Chians tremendously for their cultural contributions, and two, because Chios had become known as the best allies that Athens had by that particular time.
Interesting. This is interesting. Every schoolboy is always told that the Athenians and the Greeks, well, the Greeks invented democracy, which is accurate, and that it was developed in Athens. Now you're telling us something new, that actually democracy developed earliest, as far as we know, in Chios. Fascinating. Now these
almost all of Greek culture, including democracy, developed in Ionia before it developed in the mainland of Greece. There's no doubt about it.
Now these democratic peoples, the Ionians, the Chians in particular, were now under the yoke of a tyranny, the Persian tyranny, for how many years now?
For about 50 years, and it steadily got worse and worse until the Chians took the leadership among the islands, Ionian islands. The Chians took the leadership in fighting against the Persians, and they joined the Miletus, which is on the mainland of Asia Minor, and they organized a large navy, and that is why we find them facing practically alone an overwhelming Persian force.
Now we've kept the audience in suspense for too long. Now let's get to what actually happened at the Battle of Lade.
Well, the Battle of Lade, the Chians, Herodotus in his history, which Herodotus is known as the father of history, he gives...
He's not a Chian, is he?
No.
Okay.
No. He gives
just checking.
He gives an extensive description of the Battle of Lade, and he gives tremendous credit to the Chians that they fought off the huge fleet, the Persian fleet. They fought it off continuously, and they managed to actually inflict tremendous amount of casualties on the Persian ships, and eventually many of the Chian ships withdrew and left the scene. So essentially it was a defeat, but it was a defeat which was something like a defeat which was so costly to the Persians that it set back Persian plans for continual advance into Europe quite a bit for a number of years. And also it gave encouragement to many of the other Greeks that it was possible to fight the Persians, because the Persians were like a colossus in those days.
So this was sort of a spark of inspiration and a moral boost to the democratic peoples of Europe at that time, which were the Greeks.
Which were the Greeks, essentially.
Yes. The Persians, it put a chink in their armor, so to say. It gave us
very
some hope
much so,
that this, I guess we could call it this juggernaut of the Persian Empire could be defeated. It was vulnerable.
Definitely, and especially it was an encouragement because the Persians had such an overwhelming force. As, you know, they outnumbered the Greek forces almost 4-1.
So if the Greeks could only get a compatible force to go up against the Persians, then most likely they could defeat the Persians.
That was the idea. And the Chians, for many, many years afterwards, they were among the leaders of the fight against the continual Persian expansion. What happened after this was a disaster for Chios. Also, the Persian army occupied Chios, and they went through the Chian navy, what was left of it, went to other Ionian areas for shelter, and Chios was left undefended. And tragically enough, it suffered a lot because the Persians landed a huge army in Chios, and they spread across the whole length of the island, went through the entire island from one end to another, killing and enslaving the young girls and making eunuchs of the boys and enslaving the young boys for the Persian slave markets and the princes.
So the island was devastated, decimated.
It was devastated and decimated, and then the Persians put in Stratus, who was a puppet. Stratus was a Chian, who was a puppet of the Persians, and he actually ruled Chios for a number of years.
Can I just regress a bit? What this is reminding me of World War II. In World War II, up until 1940, for a year, the war in Europe was raging, and the Axis hadn't been defeated yet. And the first victory against the Axis, the first chink in the armor of the Nazi Italian fascist Axis, was one of the Greeks defeating the Axis in northern Greece and in Albania. So it seems that democracy is being saved often in the southern Balkans.
Well,
anyway,
that is true.
and the Persians, so let's get back to the Persians, basically wiped out civilization in Chios.
Well, they didn't really wipe out civilization. What they did was basically they went through and they picked off as many slaves, young slaves, as they wanted. And then they established a puppet to rule Chios. Stratus, the puppet to rule Chios. But he didn't last long. About a dozen years later, 15 years later, they had, the Chians actually sent embassy of a secret mission of 6 young Chians to the Spartans and other Ionians to organize another revolt in Chios and try to obtain assistance for Chios to free themselves from Stratus.
Did this work?
And it actually did work. What happened was that first the Spartan fleet started moving towards Chios. Then the Navy of Samos had a change of mind by that time, and the Navy of Samos decided to move in to go against the Persians.
And regain their honor.
And regain the honor which was pretty much besmirched, as Herodotus said in his history, while the honor of Chios was celebrated all over the Greek world for that time. And they managed to defeat an extremely large Persian navy and fleet at Mycale, which is a promontory of Asia Minor near, not too far from Lade and Chios. And this defeat, which is not well known, was actually more substantial than the better known defeats at Marathon, and it really broke the back of the Persian navy and army at that particular time. And it took place on the same day that the other Greeks defeated another Persian army at Plataea.
So this is long before Marathon, actually.
This was before Marathon, and this victory was a crucial victory in stopping the Persian advance for another number of years, because it made it impossible for the Persians to bring enough forces to bear at Marathon years later.
Now, so we can say that this battle at Mycale, this naval battle that
it was a combination naval and land battle.
This basically broke the back of the Persians, so that even in the future, when they regained their strength, they weren't able to completely defeat the Greeks in the mainland.
They weren't able. At Mycale, the Persians had an army of 60,000 men, which for 479 BC was a huge army. I mean, it's equivalent to today having an army of 500,000 men. It was a monumental army, and that was almost totally wiped out. The Persians never recovered from this battle. And
now, did the Ionian Islands and the Ionian League basically get all its land free? I mean, were all the Ionian peoples, all the Greek peoples of Asia Minor and the Aegean Islands now, for the most part, Persian free?
Basically, they were Persian free for a number of years. However, when Athens took the lead at that particular time, Athens took the lead of the Greek world.
It was the ascendancy of Athenian civilization.
The ascendancy of Athenian civilization, and Athens...
Thanks to Hios, we may add.
To a large extent. Chios was very influential in Athens, and in fact, the Athenians, in many respects, considered the Chians as their instructors in many ways, because much of Athenian sculpture was based on the Chian school of sculptors, which was extremely popular in Athens, and also science and philosophy was influenced by Chian science and philosophy.
Can we speculate that maybe some Chian refugees found their way to Athens and influenced?
Well, it is known that quite a few Chians actually did go to Athens, and the Chians spread all over at that particular time. They spread all over everywhere from the Black Sea areas to France to South Africa. There was a large Chian colony in Egypt as early as 600 BC at Naucratis. It was
say that's the
Naucratis.
City? Naucratis is the city in Egypt that was a Chian colony.
Well, there was a large Chian colony there in that city. They were invited there by a pharaoh of Egypt at that time, Amasis, who was a Philhellene. And he actually sought to learn new ideas, including in everything from science to merchandising to trade to literature from the Greeks. He thought the Greeks were the people who were developing so many new things, and he wanted Egypt to learn from the Greeks.
So this is
and also benefit from Greek trade as well.
This is contrary to what Martin Bernal has been telling us in books like Black Athena and other monstrosities like that. Nonsense books.
Actually, he doesn't really go into the establishment of the Greek colony Naucratis about 600 BC.
Well, it's convenient to ignore it.
Even though it's well documented by Egyptian sources as well as Greek sources.
Interesting.
And the Chians had spread all over to the world in that area. However, another problem was about ready to come, and that is the Chians became the most loyal followers, allies of the Athenians. In many areas, the Athenians became, as Athenians had taken the lead in defeating the Persians with the Spartans, but the Athenians considered that their navy had the predominant effect on defeating the Persian invasion of Europe.
The Athenians felt that their own navy?
The navy at Salamis was mainly responsible for defeating the Persian invasion of Greece.
Well, this is what we're all taught, and this is what we all know. This is true, isn't it?
Well, it is not really true, because without the defeat of Mycale and other defeats, the Athenian victory would not have been possible even at Lade. Lade was it was a victory for the Persians, but it was what you might call a Pyrrhic victory. It was so costly that probably at least half of the Persian fleet at that time was wiped out. It took quite a few years.
In other words, by the time the Athenians faced the Persian Empire, by the time they came face to face with the Persian enemy had its back broken twice and was weakened and was beat up or seriously bruised by the Chian military forces in at least two battles.
And the Chian navy. And the whole world at that time knew it. So Athens, however, had taken the lead in freeing the Greeks, but on the other hand, it became more and more dictatorial towards the Greeks, who initially had joined the Athenian League, and the Chians were among the first to join the Athenian League. But Athens, instead of...
Should have been called the Chian League. Why was it called the Athenian League?
Because the Athenians at that time had the biggest force. Well, that's it. But they started taking over, and they started restricting the merchandising of the rights of the Chian merchants. Even they started prohibiting the coining of silver money in anywhere in all the members of the Athenian League, and they started essentially setting up an Athenian dictatorship over the other Greeks. So this caused more and more resentment among the other Greeks, and you started getting rebellions against Athens. And the Chians for a long time were very loyal to Athens. In fact, at 440 BC, when Samos rebelled, Pericles was the leader of Athens, and he sent Sophocles, who is a famous playwright, as we all know, but he was also a general, an Athenian general. He sent him on a mission to Chios to obtain Chian help against the Samians and others who had rebelled against Athens. And we have an account, a fascinating account, when he met the Chian poet and historian Ion, and they discussed the affairs of the world and philosophy and art. And the upshot was that Chios sent much of its navy again to help the Athenians.
Well, they didn't have a very good feeling about the Samians, being twice betrayed by the Samians.
That's right. They weren't that happy about the Samians. But eventually the Athenians turned the screws more and more on Chios. And in 412 BC, Chios took the lead in organizing a massive Ionian revolt against Athens.
We have less than a minute left. I want to thank you, Dr. Illich. I just wanted, a quote just came to mind when I was reading my classic history when I was in school. A quote, when the Persians had finally entered Athens, the quote goes something like this. The Persians had entered Athens. They had burned the city to the ground. They had reached the Acropolis and were dismantling the Parthenon. But the Athenians had not yet been defeated. And we can add to that quote, maybe because of the Hians, or thanks to the Hians. Thank you, Dr. Illich, for being here, and you've got to come back for part 3 and part 4 and part 5, however far and however long it takes to do this glorious and, as we will see, tragic history of Chios. Thank you for watching Orthodox Christian Television. Please call us and let us know you're watching. There's a number that comes up at the end of the screen. There's also an email address. Just let us know you're watching, and if you'd like, you can leave comments. This is boring, this is exciting, some of it's boring, some of it's exciting. Please talk about something else or continue talking about this. Your feedback is important to us. Thank you for calling. My name is Father Christodolos from the Cathedral of St. Markellos. Good night.
Kyrie,